Any further amendments? Ms. Lee.
Before I get to my amendment, I want to associate myself with the remarks of our ranking member and just say that this pattern of denigrating women by the commander-in-chief, Donald Trump, sends really a despicable message to my 3 granddaughters, to all girls and all women, and really should be condemned. Let me offer my amendment now. This is quite a day. This is Lee Amendment number 1. It's straightforward.
Clerk will report the amendment.
An amendment offered by Ms. Lee. At the end of the bill, insert the following. Section, the authorization for use of military force.
To the spell of the reading.
Consider it done. The gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment would repeal the overly broad, this is the 2001 authorization to use military force after a period of 8 months after the enactment of this act, giving the administration and Congress sufficient time to decide what measures should replace it. This is not only timely, Mr. Chairman, it is really necessary. Now, on September 14, 2001, I did not vote for this authorization because I knew then that it would provide a blank check to wage war anywhere, anytime, for any length by any president. In the last 16 years, it has become increasingly clear that this AUMF has essentially provided the president, any president since then, all of our presidents, the authority to wage war in perpetuity. In fact, the Congressional Research Service has found that the 2001 AUMF has been used more than 37 times in 14 countries to justify military action and other activities, including warrantless surveillance and wiretapping, indefinite detention practices at Gitmo, targeted killing operations using lethal drones, and the open-ended expansion of military operations abroad. In addition to these activities, this AUMF has reportedly been invoked to deploy troops in Syria, Afghanistan, Yemen, Djibouti, Kenya, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia. Right now, we know that any president can unilaterally wage war under this outdated 2001 authorization. The last 2 presidents have bombed the Middle East and Africa, and President Trump, of course, is following down a similar path. The administration has authorized and launched airstrikes against Syria, sent more troops to fight ISIS, and now wants to send thousands of additional United States troops to Afghanistan. And I know that while we may not share a common position on replacement of the 2000 AUMF, many of us do agree that it's overly broad, and this authority is a major and concerning deterioration, really, of congressional oversight and war-making authority. And I think many of us can also agree that a robust debate and vote is necessary, long overdue, and must take place. Let me be clear. With the 2001 AUMF still on the book in its current form, any administration can rely on this blank check to wage endless war. So I ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Lee, for your comments. Ms. Granger.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to the amendment of the authorization for use of military force, called the AUMF, which this amendment attempts to repeal, is better known as the 9/11 AUMF, and is necessary for the Department of Defense to fight the global war on terrorism. U.S. military forces are conducting campaigns against al-Qaeda and al-Qaeda-affiliated forces worldwide using this authority. If agreed to, this amendment would kill the 9/11 AUMF on a specific date following the enactment of this act and applies to all such actions being carried out on or before that date. The amendment is a deal breaker and would tie the hands of the U.S. to act unilaterally or with partner nations with regard to al-Qaeda and al-Qaeda-affiliated terrorism. Let me be clear about what this amendment does. It cripples our ability to conduct counterterrorism operations against terrorists who pose a threat to the United States persons and interests. The amendment intends to put in place a major policy change that does not belong in this bill. In my judgment, the amendment dangerously and erroneously assumes that the terrorist threat from al-Qaeda and its affiliates has ended. The terrorist threat today is no less real and in many ways more daunting than it was when the Congress overwhelmingly gave the President the authority to protect us against those that want to do us harm. Some would argue that core al-Qaeda is weakened, as events in Yemen, Iraq, and Syria have shown. Its affiliates and new terrorist groups continue to maintain strength. This amendment would effectively eliminate the President's ability to address that threat or other emerging threats from al-Qaeda affiliated or like-minded groups in North Africa, the Horn of Africa, and elsewhere. Therefore, I strongly urge rejection of this amendment.
Thank you, Ms. Granger. Mr. Vskosky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in strong support of the gentlewoman's amendment. First of all, we are not determining policy under the amendment. We are suggesting 8 months after the enactment of this bill, policy should be determined. And there is nothing to prohibit this institution from beginning that debate on July 11th when we return from the holiday weekend. It does nothing until a new policy is put in place, so we in no way cripple or retard the ability of our military to deal with threats we face. The world has changed, and administrations have changed. We are now under the third administration, and we have switched parties since we had the original authorization. We are now in the 8th Congress with switching of control of political parties since that determination was made. We are asking members of the military to potentially give their lives for this nation. We should give them some of our time to meet our constitutional responsibility and to develop a current policy for their sacrifice.
Thank you, Mr. Vskosky. Anyone further comments? Mr. Cole?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to rise and support my friend's amendment, and I couldn't agree more with the ranking member on the subcommittee's point of view on this. This is something where Congress has collectively avoided taking responsibility for years. The Constitution is awfully clear, as my friend points out, about where war-making authority resides. It resides in this body. And we've had leadership, honestly, on both sides that have put off this debate again and again and again. As a matter of fact, when the Secretary appeared before our subcommittee, I asked him, would it help you to have a new authorization? Let me make it very clear. I would support that authorization. I'm very much in favor of taking the war to ISIS. And he said, yes, it would. It's something that would help us a lot. So if we're going to send people to war, we owe them the support of the Congress of the United States, the visible support. And for those that have a different opinion, that is fair enough. That's what we're supposed to do, is debate these things. We're at war against an enemy that did not exist in a place that we did not expect possibly be stretched. To cover this is just beyond belief to me. So I thank my gentle friend with whom I often disagree, but always enjoy working with when we have the opportunity to do it, because I think she has raised an important point. I think she's done it repeatedly and effectively, and I think the Congress ought to listen to what she has to say, and we ought to debate this issue and provide the authority, I would hope, of the Congress of the United States for what we're doing, or if that's the wrong thing and the majority has a different point of view, that would be the appropriate thing. But it's not fair to ask men and women to fight and not have the full support of the Congress of the United States behind them. So with that, I yield back.
Mr. Cole, any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, just briefly, I'd like
Ryan.
to rise in support of the gentlelady's amendment here. Those of us who have, and associate myself with Mr. Cole's remarks, the fact that the men and women who serve us, when we travel and we go see them in the Persian Gulf and far-flung places around the world, they need to know that we have had the discussion, we've vetted all our interests, we've had the debate, and we're behind them, and we're behind what they're doing. So I want to thank the gentlelady, thank Mr. Cole for speaking up and support this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Any further discussion? Mr. Stewart is recognized.
I would brief, thank you. I feel like my world is rocked because I see these two that have very different opinions, and yet I agree with you. And as a former military officer, I have on my father's wings. He served as a pilot in the Air Force in World War II. 5 of my 6 brothers served in the military. They have the courage to go out and fight these wars, and they notice that we don't have the courage to debate this and to give them the authority to go do this. And I know that from my friends who are in the military now. They notice that Congress doesn't have the guts to stand up and have this debate and give them the authority that they're continuing every day and putting their lives and their well-being and the sacrifice of their families. And for every soldier over there, there's someone back home who loves them, who is sacrificing just as well. They notice that Congress doesn't have the courage to have this debate. I support the intent of the amendment. I hope Congress will have the courage to do that. I've been saying that for several years now. I yield back. Thank you.
Mr. Stewart, any further discussion?
Sure.
The
Thank you.
gentleman,
Just very briefly, I just want to rise in
Taylor
support.
from Virginia.
I want to rise in support as well too. I think that we've seen a disproportionate sacrifice with the military community who has gone over and over again, and I believe that we owe them the debate. Whatever side you come on or come down on, I think that we do owe them a debate, because the American people should have a debate on this via the representatives to decide what we're going to do. So I just very briefly thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Ms. Lee, Mr. Rupersberger.
Came in this morning, I was going to vote no, but we're debating right now. And when two respected members of the military stand up and make a comment, I'm listening. Barbara Lee, you and I love you. I love the fact you are in a position to take a lot of positions that I don't take, but that's what we need. But I'm going to be with you on this, and your tenacity has come through. And I think right now that this is what's important for America, and that we need to move forward on this. So I'm going to vote yes.
Thank you. You're making converts all over the place, Ms. Lee.
This should be bipartisan, Mr.
It
Chairman.
is, and you have been incredibly insistent and persevered on this issue for a number of years. I think we recognize you, and obviously you have allies in the room, and we share your concern. Anyone else recognize Ms. Lee to close? Not.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your remarks and those remarks of all of those who have spoken on behalf of this resolution. This should be bipartisan. This is about our country. This is about our troops. This is about Congress and our constitutional responsibility to do our job. And I remember, and many were here, many were not here, those horrific days after 9/11. This resolution came before the Congress 3 days, September 14th. It was overly broad. It was 60 words. And I think at this point, 16 years later, given the nature of the threats we face, that we should, in a bipartisan way, support my amendment. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. The question is on the Lee amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Oh, in the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Thank you, Ms. Lee. Further amendments? Any further amendments?